in 1949, Stalin has reason to believe his place in Soviet history is secure.
The railway was the project of Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin.
Stalin's plan was to join the eastern and western parts of Russia. The railway started in Salikard and ended in Igarka. Thousands of political prisoners were sent here to Salikard to work on it.
Among them, Anatoly Marachev's grandfather.
My grandfather was labeled an enemy of the state. He was against Stalin's policies and sentenced to 10 years in a labor camp in Salikard.
1,200 miles northeast of Moscow, Salikard is the only town in the world that's on the Arctic Circle. Temperatures here often plummet to minus 60 degrees. So it was an ideal place to stash away Stalin's political enemies.
Most of the labor camps were located in the isolated regions of the Arctic, and soon those who began to work on the railway faced these harsh conditions.
Blizzard-like conditions in the winter, millions of mosquitoes, gnats, and parasites in the summer.
After almost 30 years of unparalleled power, Joseph Stalin dies at 74.
Construction on the railway eventually stopped in 1953 after Stalin's death, but the damage was already done. Marachev's grandfather died, along with tens of thousands of other political prisoners.
People call this the railroad of death because many could not handle the cold and the bugs.
Historical records show Christians were also killed in the Salikard gulags.
We have eyewitness accounts of secret prayer gatherings, Germans from Volga region, Russian Christians from the Caucasus and elsewhere. They prayed for this harsh region.
Several years ago, Anatoly Marachev moved with his family to Salikard to honor the memory of his grandfather and the countless who died in the Siberian labor camps.
These prisoners prayed that one day the gospel will reach the peoples of this land. Today, we are seeing the fruits of their prayers.
And the fruit is the Good News Church, a thriving evangelical congregation that has risen in the heart of the Siberian tundra, led by Pastor Marachev.
People are turning to the Lord all over this region. Families are being healed, people delivered from alcohol and drugs.
And the location of Pastor Anatoly's church is very significant. You see, back in the early 50s, this exact spot used to hold thousands of political as well as religious prisoners in labor camps.
To have a spiritual center, a house of worship, in this location is not just symbolic, but also strategic.
In partnership with the Association for Spiritual Renewal, which focuses on bringing the gospel to the former Soviet Union, Pastor Marachev uses his church to train the next generation of Christian leaders. Mikhailo Chernakov oversees the program.
We have a program called Schools Without Walls that's preparing young men and women to go into full-time ministry. We equip, disciple, then send out prospective leaders to reach these remote communities in Siberia and around Russia.
Good News Church is also training young people like 25-year-old Marina Shevchenko from neighboring Ukraine to be effective missionaries.
My heart is to share the gospel with the nomadic tribes. Before I can do that, I have to understand their culture. That's where Good News Church comes in. They've been working with these tribes for years.
And speaking of remote tribes, when he's not busy leading his flock, you'll find Pastor Marachev driving across the Russian tundra to reach nomadic villages with the gospel.
This is the one time in the entire year that you can actually get to this remote part of the Siberian tundra, because what we are on right now is a huge frozen lake.
It took us 4 hours today to travel less than 60 kilometers, but it was worth it. These tribes were once forgotten, not anymore.
Members of his church take regular trips to deliver food, clothes, and medical supplies. On this particular trek, Pastor Marachev will share communion with a nomadic family that he recently introduced to Jesus Christ.
I'm so happy today. We are the only Christians in this village. To take part in communion with other believers is very special for my family.
Back in Salikhat, home to some 40,000 people, Marichev is extending the church's influence to minister to orphans, the homeless, and those living with HIV/AIDS. He says this is all part of the desire to continue the legacy of those who came before him, enduring hardship and persecution, to see the gospel preached in Siberia and beyond.
That's what I stand on, those prayers of the prisoners. I believe that God's kingdom will reach the far corners of this difficult land for which our grandfathers shed their blood and prayed a long time ago for.
George Thomas, CBN News in Salikhat, northern Siberia.